Have you ever wondered how some people defied all expectations and left a legacy that transcends centuries? In the genealogy of Jesus, we find 5 extraordinary women: Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and Mary, each a true figure who changed the course of history. In an era when women's worth was consistently undervalued, these figures defied norms and left their mark on the Messiah's lineage. Through stories of faith, courage, and resilience, they show us that God's grace reaches everyone, regardless of circumstances. These women weren't perfect. Far from it. They faced hardships, bore labels, challenged standards. Yet they became essential in Jesus' genealogy. By exploring their stories, you'll discover the power of redemptive power and transforming grace in action. Forces that exceed human expectations. What drove Tamar to fight for justice? What made Rahab risk everything for a newfound faith? And what led a young woman like Mary to embrace the role of the Savior's mother? Get ready to explore faith stories that go beyond the ordinary. These 5 women, with lives marked by challenges and triumphs, not only survived adversity but transformed their realities. And the best part? They show us that the legacy we leave can echo through generations, touching lives we'd never imagine. So, are you ready to uncover the impact of these 5 heroines? The biblical genealogy is not just a list of names. It's a lifeline carrying the divine fidelity and covenant with humanity through each generation. Imagine the stories and challenges faced by each ancestor, who, despite their flaws and limitations, were fundamental pieces in shaping what we now understand as the path to redemption. Through these records, God demonstrated that His grace works in unexpected times and ways, confirming His plan across generations. Seeing this sequence of lives and choices reminds us that no one is forgotten in the divine plan, and perhaps in each name, God reveals something about who He is and how He chooses His representatives. These genealogies also teach us about the eternal legacy, a profound concept that often eludes the modern world, but lies at the heart of living for something that extends beyond time. With each name, we are reminded that our actions and decisions shape the future, creating impacts beyond our imagining. Who knows, in the small choices of each day, we may be crafting legacies for those who come after us. Here lies perhaps an invitation to consider our own steps and what we wish to leave for future generations. What would you do differently if you knew your steps would echo in hundreds of lives? In this line of generations, we find examples that reflect God's redemptive power and transforming grace, forces that alter realities and break patterns. How often do we read about characters who, at first glance, seem distant from any divine ideal, yet through grace, they achieve grand roles in biblical history? These genealogies don't mask weaknesses. Instead, they exalt the truth that God chooses and uses whomever He wants, showing everyone that redemption is for those who trust Him. And if He did that with them, who knows what He might do in our lives? Moreover, these genealogies carry the power to shatter expectations and overcome cultural norms, a constant theme throughout the generations. Many of these stories define norms and traditions, proving that the Messiah's lineage was constructed not by human power but by divine determination to transform and elevate the unexpected. This leads us to reflect on our own lives and the norms we accept without question. How far are we influenced by what society expects of us? How do these stories encourage us to defy expectations and tread a path of faith and purpose? Perhaps the most impressive aspect of these genealogies is how God selects characters with acts of courage in the Bible and examples of faith, reinforcing the message that He values human essence even in its imperfections. Think of each name in Jesus' lineage. Lives with mistakes, falls, but also a courage that, at some point, defies the status quo. These stories motivate us to recognize our own strength and believe that, like them, we too are called to be courageous. Who do you connect with most in this long line of faith and history? The genealogy of Jesus, presented in the book of Matthew, brings a significant surprise by including 5 women: Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and Mary. At a time when ancestry was recorded through men, seeing these 5 women in the lineage of the Messiah is a powerful reminder of how God's kingdom shatters expectations and redefines roles. Each of them represents more than a name. They are symbols of redemption and divine grace in its most intense form. Each story, filled with moments of pain and overcoming, shows us that divine grace transcends social and religious norms, opening space for the extraordinary in everyone's life. Tamar, the first of these women, secured her place in history in an unusual and courageous way. In a culture that denied her voice and dignity, she chose to act and fight for justice, demonstrating acts of courage in the Bible. Imagine the strength it took to challenge a society that silenced women, yet still sought a right that belonged to her. Her actions echo a call to everyone who feels the need to take a stand for their lives, even when society imposes barriers. Tamar is an example that sometimes breaking norms and seeking justice is not only necessary but also part of a greater legacy. Rahab, a Canaanite, chose a life of faith when everything around her pointed otherwise. She was a woman outside the norm, a prostitute in Jericho, but it was her trust in God that transformed her into a heroine. Rahab represents the transforming grace that crosses cultures and transforms labels. Her story reminds us that no one is beyond the reach of divine grace. Rahab gave up her safety to help Israelite spies, and in doing so, changed her story forever. How often do we feel unprepared for major changes? And how often do we forget that courage and faith can lead us to unexpected paths? Ruth's story is another remarkable example of loyalty and faith in action. Ruth, a foreigner, chose to walk alongside Naomi and adopted the God of Israel as her own God, defying the norms of her culture. She represents the power of love and loyalty that transcends boundaries, bringing the example of faith that has inspired generations. By choosing the unknown, she secured her place in the lineage of King David and eventually, of Jesus. Like Ruth, we are challenged to have a faith that isn't limited by circumstances and to invest in relationships that honor our values and purpose, even when it means stepping out of our comfort zone. Bathsheba, marked by tragedies and tough decisions, reveals a powerful side of God's redemptive power. Involved in a situation she did not choose, her story is one of resilience and grace, resulting in the birth of Solomon, one of Israel's greatest kings. She shows how God can turn dark moments into purpose, rewriting destinies. Her story questions our view of human flaws and the grace God gives amidst them. Bathsheba invites us to reflect on how we handle adversity and on the transformative power of trusting in God even when life presents unexpected challenges. These 5 women are not only part of Jesus' genealogy, they are protagonists of a story of faith, courage, and overcoming. Each, in her own way, faced prejudices and chose to trust in God's greater purpose, becoming part of the eternal legacy that impacts generations to this day. Their stories pave a path of hope for anyone who has ever felt marginalized or underestimated. And as we move through Jesus' genealogy, we realize that the example of these women is a call to a living faith that challenges and transforms. How might these trajectories influence the role of other women who would follow? The story of Tamar is one of those examples where courage stands against injustice, illuminating the path for all who seek their place in the world. Tamar wasn't someone with great resources or influence. Her only weapon was her determination. In a society where women were often silenced, she took a stand to secure what was rightfully hers, even knowing the consequences this might bring. This attitude teaches us about the value of seeking justice, especially when we're at a disadvantage. Tamar shows us that true justice isn't about titles or status, but is rooted in human dignity and the courage to stand up for what's right. In that context, Tamar needed to disguise herself and act boldly to secure her place in the lineage of the Messiah. This act might seem radical, but it was precisely this determination that secured her place in history and taught us about breaking patterns that limit people to secondary roles. She reminds us that, often, it's necessary to question and challenge what's been imposed on us. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where you had to fight for something you know how difficult but necessary it can be. Tamar is an example that, even without the support of many, we can defend our rights and honor our own story. Her act of courage and perseverance was not just a personal victory but a landmark that echoed through generations. Tamar managed to break the cultural norms of her time, challenging a society that gave little respect to women and their needs. This is one of the most fascinating aspects of this genealogy. It shows us that God chooses those who are willing to fight, who don't settle for what the world imposes on them. Tamar represents the possibility of overcoming cultural norms, showing that the most lasting changes come from people who dare to challenge the established. How many of us carry this same desire for transformation? More than a story of vindication, Tamar's journey speaks about the role of dignity in the face of adversity. She reminds us that the pursuit of justice doesn't have to be loud, but it must be persistent. With each step, Tamar bore the weight of a difficult decision, but also the strength of trust in something greater than herself. This reflects the divine grace present even in the most challenging situations. And by looking at her life, we realize that this grace can work in us, motivating us to seek what's right, regardless of obstacles. In the end, Tamar's presence in Jesus' genealogy reminds us of the impact that bold choices can have on future generations. The dignity she brought to her struggle, facing society and securing her place, is a generational impact that transcends Tamar herself. She is not just a name, she's a reminder that justice is a fundamental value and that through it, we create a legacy that cannot be erased. And so, with Tamar, we realize that every act of courage can open doors to something much greater, introducing a new perspective on what it means to be part of the Messiah's lineage. Rahab is a figure who defies expectations and redefines what it means to be a heroine in the Bible. A Canaanite prostitute in Jericho, she wouldn't fit the profile many would expect to find in the genealogy of Jesus. Yet, it is her faith and courage that place her in this place of honor, symbolizing the power of salvation that goes beyond cultural barriers. Rahab chose to trust the God of Israel, even knowing the risks. Her story shows us that true faith doesn't choose a moment or situation. It manifests even in unlikely circumstances, as it did in Rahab's life. Her decision to help the spies not only saved her life but also placed her in the lineage of the Messiah, showing how God can use people in all situations. Rahab is the embodiment of transforming grace, and her example reminds us that for God, the past is not a limitation. In her courage, she defied human logic and trusted in something greater than her own understanding. This choice made her an ally of Israel and a reference of faith for those who come after. How often do we fail to act out of fear of judgment? Rahab encourages us to look beyond what seems impossible, and remember that even on society's margins, God can work powerfully. By trusting in God and giving up what she knew, she became one of the Bible's most improbable yet inspiring heroines. Rahab's role goes beyond her own story. She is an example of acts of courage in the Bible, an inspiration to those who face difficult situations and need the courage to act. In a world where every decision can seem risky, Rahab teaches us that sometimes the most impactful choice is the one we make when trusting in God, even without guarantees. For those facing moments of choice where there is no visible security, remembering Rahab can be a relief and encouragement. It's an invitation to take risks in faith, to take steps that, though risky, can change destinies, just as she did. By helping the Israelite spies, Rahab chose to break with her past, accepting an uncertain future. This symbolizes God's redemptive power, which doesn't see people by their past choices but by the potential He knows they hold. How many of us carry labels or judgments that limit us? Rahab shows us that no circumstance defines who we can be in God. It's a reminder that true worth isn't in our personal history, but in what we choose to do with the opportunity for a fresh start that He offers. Finally, as we enter Rahab's journey, we understand that her faith in the face of risk wasn't just an individual victory but a seed of generational impact. The example she left spanned centuries, showing everyone that genuine faith can transform realities and change stories. And imagining what that faith must have meant for her and her family, we can't help but ask ourselves, in what areas of our lives can we be as bold as Rahab, leaving a legacy of faith and courage for those who come after us? Ruth's story is a vivid example of how loyalty and faith can transform destinies. A Moabite who chose to follow Naomi, her Israelite mother-in-law, Ruth abandoned her home, her culture, and even her gods to embrace an uncertain future. She represents the kind of example of faith that surpasses blood ties and is rooted in profound values. Ruth didn't just decide to accompany Naomi but adopted the God of Israel as her God, demonstrating a loyalty that transcends any social norm. In her choices, we see the beauty of a faith that doesn't waver, even in the face of adversity. How many of us would be able to do the same? Ruth's decision to stay by Naomi's side led her to meet Boaz, a man who also understood the value of loyalty and generosity. By accepting this path, Ruth entered the lineage of the Messiah, showing how dedication can lead us to places we'd never imagine. This story is an invitation to all who feel like outsiders or out of place, to trust that loyalty and faith can open unexpected doors. Like Ruth, we are called to look beyond momentary limitations and invest in relationships that honor our principles and faith. Ruth also teaches us about the importance of generational impact. Her decision to follow Naomi not only changed her own life but impacted generations, becoming a crucial link in the lineage of King David and eventually, Jesus. This connection with the Messiah is a powerful reminder that our choices today can shape tomorrow in ways we could never imagine. What might seem like a simple demonstration of loyalty became an eternal legacy. How often do we underestimate the value of an apparently small decision, but which, in perspective, can echo for generations? Moreover, Ruth's life speaks of breaking patterns. In a time when society defined people by their origin, Ruth broke expectations and demonstrated that true dignity comes from character and faith, not origin. She didn't let cultural limitations dictate her worth, but embraced a new identity through her faith and loyalty. This attitude continues to inspire those who seek to overcome labels and prejudices. It's a practical example that we can break with what has been imposed and seek a life that resonates with our deepest values. Thus, Ruth's legacy is a tribute to divine grace that invites us to be part of something greater than ourselves. Her loyalty to Naomi and her faith in God placed her in a special spot in Jesus' genealogy. It wasn't her position or past that defined her worth, but the courage and love with which she chose to live. This is Ruth's call to us, to invest in loyalty, faith, and transforming grace so that we might leave a worthy legacy, something to inspire generations. And as we move forward, we are led to ponder, how is our own legacy being built? Bathsheba's story is marked by profound challenges and the ability to move forward even amid pain. Involved in a complicated situation with King David, she bore the consequences of decisions that weren't hers but that deeply impacted her life. Yet, her story doesn't end in tragedy. She represents divine grace that allows new beginnings and redemption. Bathsheba went from a victim of circumstances to one of the central figures in the lineage of the Messiah, reminding us that God has the power to turn even the darkest moments into something meaningful. This is the kind of resilience that many of us seek, isn't it? Bathsheba not only survived adversity but overcame it, demonstrating a strength that inspires. By having Solomon, one of Israel's greatest kings, she became an example of generational impact, someone whose journey left a lasting impact. Even amid losses and challenges, she played a crucial role in establishing the messianic lineage. This legacy shows us that true resilience isn't limited to survival but extends to creating a different future for those to come. Bathsheba proves that resilience and faith walk hand in hand, shaping what we leave for future generations. Bathsheba's journey is a practical lesson in breaking patterns. She could have been reduced to a victim in her own narrative, but instead, she became a figure of strength and determination. Her presence in Jesus' genealogy reinforces the idea that God doesn't choose his instruments based on perfect pasts, but rather on hearts capable of transforming pain into purpose. Bathsheba teaches us that we don't have to be limited by what has happened to us. We are free to redefine who we are and to fight for a future that reflects our true essence. Bathsheba's resilience is also an act of trust in God, of believing that despite the mistakes and shadows that may surround life, there is a greater purpose. In the end, she accepted her role and contributed to building the kingdom of Israel, trusting that God could use even her difficult experiences for good. Often, we too are called to trust in the divine purpose, even when everything around us seems confusing or meaningless. It is our trust in God that gives us the courage to move forward, and Bathsheba's story is a living testament to this type of faith. Finally, as we observe Bathsheba's journey, we understand that her resilience is more than a personal story. It's a message of redemptive power that inspires us to look at adversity from a different perspective. She reminds us that no matter how difficult the moments we face, there's always the possibility of a new beginning. And, reflecting on the impact of her life, we are led to ponder what each of us can build, even amid hardships. How might our own experiences be transformed into a legacy, just as Bathsheba's were? Mary, a humble young woman from Nazareth, was called to a unique role in Jesus' genealogy, to become the mother of the Messiah. Her acceptance of this divine call didn't come without risks. She knew the implications and weight such a responsibility would bring to her life. Yet Mary trusted God completely and accepted her mission, demonstrating a faith that transcends human understanding. Her response to the angel Gabriel, "Let it be done according to your word," is an example of trust in God in its purest form. Amid doubts and suspicious glances, Mary shows us that obedience to God is the essence of true faith. Mary's faith is a powerful testimony of divine grace and of the impact that a response of trust can have on generations. By embracing her role, she not only influenced her own life but changed the course of history, setting in motion the redemption that would touch all humanity. How many of us would hesitate when faced with something so unknown? Mary inspires us to move forward, even when the future seems uncertain, reminding us that God's grace sustains us at every step. Her obedient faith is an invitation for us to trust God, even when we cannot see the whole path. Mary's commitment to her role is not only an example of faith, but also of breaking patterns. In a society that valued reputation and status, accepting a pregnancy out of wedlock was challenging and dangerous. She embraced her divine calling, breaking with cultural norms and redefining what it means to be in covenant with God. Mary teaches us that following the divine purpose may require the courage to leave behind human expectations and take on a greater commitment. How often do we let the fear of what others think paralyze us? With Mary, we learn that true faith does not depend on others' opinions. Mary's journey is undoubtedly one of the acts of courage in the Bible that inspires the most. Her willingness to be the mother of Jesus, even knowing the challenges this would bring, is an act of courage and trust that teaches us about the importance of saying yes to God. Throughout her life, Mary faced moments of pain and challenges, but she remained steadfast in her faith. This example of courage amid uncertainty encourages us to respond to the divine call, whatever our purpose may be. How often do we avoid challenges out of fear of the unknown? Mary reminds us that it is possible to be brave, even when the journey seems unpredictable. Finally, Mary's faith created an eternal legacy that spans generations, influencing billions of lives throughout history. Her story makes us reflect on the impact of our own choices and on how our trust in God can create a lasting legacy. Mary shows us that true greatness doesn't lie in fame or power, but in the willingness to serve a higher purpose. And, looking at her life, we are led to ask ourselves, what legacy can we build with faith and obedience in our own journey? After getting to know these 5 incredible women in Jesus' genealogy, one inevitable question arises. How can we apply the lessons of faith, courage, and determination they left us? Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and Mary taught us that the most enduring legacy doesn't come from perfection but from resilience, trust in God, and the willingness to move forward, regardless of circumstances. And you, what are you doing to build a legacy of faith in your life? These stories invite us to reflect on the choices we make daily. What patterns do we need to break? Where does our faith need to be strengthened? What are we willing to risk for something greater? Leaving an impact that resonates through generations is a choice that starts today. How about starting to live with purpose, taking the first step toward a calling that could transform your life and many others? If you want to keep learning and being inspired by powerful biblical stories like these, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Join us on this journey of discovery and growth, where each video will bring a new chapter of faith, courage, and transformation. Are you ready to live your own story of impact?